Hello, this is a lesson about maintaining your carving tools. So you've got your carving tool, you've commissioned it, which is the shaping, and then you maintain it on a day-to-day basis. So we're not going to talk about commissioning as such. We're going to look at what happens day to day as you're carving with your tools. So you've got your properly commissioned, properly shaped, sharpened carving tool, and you're carving away with it. But of course, it's going to get dull because it's being used in wood, so you strop it. You can strop it with power strop, a power wheel, and we'll deal with that in the next video. But mostly, a lot of people strop with a bench strop like this. And what you do is you place it at the cutting angle, draw it back, moving across from corner to corner, so covering the whole edge like this. And you strop regularly, and that maintains that cutting edge. So you don't need to recommission it because it's already the shape. What we're doing is maintaining the sharpness. The amount you strop will depend on how you use the tool, whether you're levering or scraping or the hardness of the wood and so on. So there's no hard and fast rule about how often you strop this tool. But the point is, for me, if I even think it's getting a little dull, then it's time to strop. And a rough rule might be something like 20 minutes of carving with a tool in a sort of average carving wood, strop 20 times, both outside and of course inside. Here are two well stropped, nicely polished, keenly sharp carving tools. But look at this. Using this flat piece of wood, I can show you the cutting angle. So you run along here, lift the edge, and there it's cutting into the wood. So this is the cutting angle, nice and low, where we want when we commission the tool. If we look at this one, coming along here, the same thing. Look, before it bites, it's right up here. So this carving tool is somewhere about twice the cutting angle of the other one. So what's going on here? What's happening is that you've got a rounded bevel. The bevel is no longer flat. It's actually rounded over this way. So the handle is lifting up. And that means that, first of all, you've got a higher cutting angle, which is less, is more stressful on the wrist here, but also you're pushing more this way rather than along it, and also it's a fatter wedge of metal. So the whole commissioning that we did, the flattening of that bevel, has gone out the window. It should be down here like this. So what's gone on? Why has that bevel become rounded? There are two things that contribute to this rounding of the bevel. The quality of the strop leather itself, and the way the strop is being used by the carver. So let's have a look at both of those now. Here's my strop, and it has thin leather that's really hard, so there's no compression in there. And ideally you want that leather to be as thin as possible. I've tried putting this abrasive, which is what the leather holds, onto the wood itself, but I've not been successful in that really. So I do use leather, and what you want is as thin as possible. But you can get thicker leather. This is my inside strop, and this is a thicker leather altogether, and there's a degree of spring in it. So what happens is, as the tool is coming along, the leather gives like this, and so that rounds the bevel over. So the first thing you've got to make sure about is that you don't have too thick a leather, and you're not getting this sort of sinking effect in the middle. The second thing, looking at the technique, as I've said, what we're trying to do is come along like this at the same cutting angle so that the whole of the bevel rests on the strop at the same time like this, right from the beginning to the end. But what carvers will do is this. They'll come along and they'll put it at this angle. So this is not your cutting angle. This is a lifted angle, as if there's a secondary bevel. So they're stropping like this, not like that. The other way you can make the bevel rounded is literally doing this. So you start off well, but as you come back, you're lifting the handle. So you're doing this. So both sharpening like this, or stropping like this, and like that, have the effect of rounding this bevel over like this. That's how you would round it over if you wanted to. So the upshot is you've now got a cutting angle at here instead of down there. As you can see, it's easy to round over the bevel. In fact, it's almost inevitable that over time you'll find the bevel rounding and the cutting angle creeping up. You won't necessarily notice it straight away, but you'll pick up a tool that you haven't used for a while and you think, oh, this cutting angle's a little bit high. It's almost always because you've rounded the bevel. So you've got a rounded bevel. What do you do about it? There's only one thing you can do, and that is to flatten it. Flatten that bevel back to the original correct cutting angle. And that only takes a couple of minutes on your finishing stone. Here's my carving tool with the rounded bevel, and you can see how nice and shiny that is. So that's well stropped, and the cutting edge is sharp, but the problem is this rounded bevel. So what we have to do is come back to our stone. This is our finishing stone, and in this case it's a translucent Arkansas, and I put oil on it. So we're not going to the coarse stone, we're just going to this finishing stone, and we present it at the right cutting angle, which is somewhere about 15 to 20 degrees. Then, just as before, we start sharpening backwards and forwards like this. And what's going to happen, and it's tricky to see, let's see if I can make this show, is you will have happening here on the top of the hill the scratches from this stone superimposed on the shininess. So you've got the scratches, which is a dull grey area, and you've got a shiny bit here towards the cutting edge and the shiny bit towards the heel, which are downhill of the bit you've removed. So as we keep working, what's going to happen is this is going to spread wider and wider, and it gets flatter and flatter and start coming towards the edge. But we don't want to go to the very edge because it's sharp. We want to stop just short. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start here, line it up, and just start sharpening at that cutting angle. I keep looking. And I can see, I don't know whether you can see this, I hope you can, but what I can see here is that I've got a flat bevel and it's met the heel already, that's the way it's worked, and it's come all the way to about 2 or 3 millimeters from this cutting edge. So it's already spread all along here. So here's my flat bevel, and I'm going to keep working it towards the cutting edge. So I'll find my cutting angle again. And I'll have another look, and already I'm flat from here, the heel, to just a thin shiny layer here, which is the original shiny bevel, and then you have this grey part here from the stone. Now this part here, this shiny bit, is what the old carvers used to call the candle, because it's not the same as looking at the cutting edge here when we're sharpening, which is the white line. This is actually on the bevel and completely different, and so they call it a candle, and I'm going to keep going until that candle goes out. In other words, that grey has gone all the way to the edge, and when I get to the edge, I'm going to stop. So keeping the same cutting angle, not lifting it to make it go quicker. Oh, I'm about 1 millimeter off now that I can see. I'm using the whole of stone. Yep, I can just see just a little bit left. Yeah, there's about 1 millimeter left. I'm going to see if we can get a close-up of that. So There's the grey from the stone, and hopefully we can see this tiny shiny rim of light here, the candle, which I'm going to work on and get to go out. So a few more strokes at the right cutting angle. And the shiny candle is out. So I stop there. If I go too far and I keep going, what I'll do is I'll create a burr on this side, the wire edge, in which case I'm going to have to remove it with a slipstone, just as when I was sharpening. But once that candle goes out, and you can be quite exact, then it's back to stropping. So you go straight back to the stropping, and start that cycle again. Stropping, keeping that low cutting angle that you've just created. And of course you'd strop the inside as well. So there you are, job done. Didn't take long, and the tool is now fit for purpose. So let's recap, and this is where I'm a bit like a science teacher. So you're carving, okay? And what you do is you strop. You strop regularly, and you keep that up, you're stropping away, and then you notice that the bevel has rounded over. Okay, so stropping rounds the bevel, and what that does is it raises the cutting angle. That raises up, which is all sorts of problems with carving. So what you then do is, of course, you flatten the bevel. This is what we've been doing. And you get back to carving and back to stropping. So you see that there's a sort of life cycle, we can call it that, a life cycle here in the carving tool. It's not that it goes from dull to sharp, it's really going from sharp, but rounded bevel, flattened bevel, rounded bevel, flattened bevel. So that's really how the carving tool is maintained, rather than, as I say, letting it going dull.